talk about Treasury Board President Duclos that he needed to make concrete steps, or there are concrete steps to take immediately. Have you actually seen concrete steps taken besides more virtue signaling that yes, we will get better?
At the beginning of the pandemic, I saw a letter that Mr. Duclos sent to the institutions, reminding them of their...
A letter does nothing, let's be honest. Has anything concrete been done, in your view?
Not to my knowledge.
No? Okay. You mentioned 15 departments that you highlighted, the primary departments. Has there been any follow-up from your department or yourself about those identified departments?
So last Friday, I sent an invitation to the ministers responsible for those 15 institutions, and I asked them to meet them personally. I think that they don't know what's going on. I really think the leaders of these institutions are kept often in the dark, or they don't want to know what's happening.
Right. What have you asked in that letter to those 15 departments? Have you asked for, I want this, this, and this, or we'd like to see this, this, and this?
I asked for a meeting so that I can tell them for each, because each of them is different. They all have different challenges. So I want to be able to tell them which one are responsible.
Yeah. You commented to, I think, Mr. Green, government needs to take leadership in disclosure and ATIPs. Like how and who? We've seen the Treasury Board, he's appeared before us, but then nothing seems to be getting done apart from empty promises. What needs to be done? What leadership has to be taken by the government, and by who?
They need to take risks. They need to change their software. They need to look at innovation systems. They need to tell their people that they are responsible for access requests. They need to put it in maybe in their performance evaluations, and that's going to be leading to the performance pay at the end. Manager needs to know that that's part of their job, and that they have to motivate their people to respond.
But it also has to come from the ministers to start it off with their deputy ministers and ADMs.
Exactly.
The comment about not accepting delays. My office submits quite a few ATIPs a year. Almost every one of them is past this 30 days. Every one of them we file a complaint with your department, and that we receive a note back that yes, the department is in breach of the Access to Information Act, but nothing gets done from there. Like, what is the point of all of this? Is it just to make MPs feel good that, oh, look, they were in breach? Is there any accountability for the departments they continually breach? And this goes long before COVID. So I don't accept any of the excuses from the department, so it's COVID. This goes long before that.
I agree, and COVID is just one more excuse, as you say.
Yeah.
But under the old Act, unfortunately, my office and me, I only had the authority to make recommendations. So if somebody was in breach of the timeline, I could recommend that they meet a new timeline. And but now I do have the authority to order an institutions to respect a certain timeline, and I've started doing that.
Okay.
And it has showed some changes.
How do we follow up and get that order then? We submitted an ATIP recently, and we got a note back. It would take 8 years. And all we asked for was emails on one specific contract and 5 low-level employees who were grading the contract, and we came back 8 years. How do we get your department then to force Public Works to do their jobs instead of what appears to be hiding?
Well, the only thing I can say is if it was a complaint that was submitted before June 2019, I did not have the authority to make orders. It's any complaints that have been filed since June 2019 that we have now the power to enforce.
So we could just follow up. Let me ask, I'm running out of time. Our last OGGO meeting, we had collection of whistleblowers. We were looking at this situation, and Canada's very weak whistleblower protection. How is our lack of a proper access information laws affecting perhaps whistleblowers and their ability to come forward, or our ability to protect them?
I think, I don't know. Like it's a very good decision, very good question. I don't have the I don't see the, like, to me, I think the whistleblowers, they need to be able to access the information, and then people have to be able to know what's going on. So that's where the link is. But between my office and what the legislation is, I'm really only responsible for making sure you're getting the information, and I'm trying to do that as quickly as possible.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. And now we'll go to...
Well, I mean, I'm going to start off with a bit of a summary in terms of how I've understood the briefing by Commissioner Maynard, and then I'm going to ask the Commissioner to basically let me know how she feels about that assessment. And the takeaway is that this government that claims to be open by default, that the access to information system had already entered into a critical phase before the pandemic, and if I understand correctly, could soon be beyond repair if certain serious problems are not resolved. This is it came off as very alarming. And the overall message that I took is that the Commissioner has identified the following issues as key in improving our country's access to information. You've stated, I think, here today quite clearly, and I thank you for your candor, that there's inadequate leadership and a lack of clear guidelines on transparency and disclosure expectations, that there is a pressing need to innovate and to allocate enough resources to the access to information system, that there is a necessity to properly document decisions and to efficiently manage institutions' information. And then the fourth point that I took away is the declassifications of records in a timely manner. Does that accurately represent kind of your briefing to this committee?
Sorry, I was on mute. These are the four pillars I find that are key for the system to better operate and to be a better access system for our Canadians. And those are actions that the government does not need legislative changes to put in place. A better legislation will definitely go a long way. I think a lot of people know that our Canadians, our legislation has been changed a little bit last year, but it's still a 34-year-old legislation mainly. We're better. We did better with the changes, but it's not perfect. So those will definitely be welcome. But the steps that you mentioned, better leadership, directive, no compliance on not accepting delays. It's almost like now the 30-day timeline. It's okay. It's just a suggestion, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I really do appreciate your candor. This is really important. Again, a government that claims to be open by default in almost every mandate letter, giving directions to ministers to be open by default, and yet we hear time and time again the challenges that have been presented, not just from you, but from the public as well. We heard extensive testimony and suggestions around whistleblowers and previous aspects. And so, you know what, when I look at like to the south, to the American example, a place from which we like to pretend we're so far further advanced in government, there are multiple ways in which proactive disclosure happens there that doesn't happen here, as it relates to lobbyists, as it relates to, just the way in which these files are managed. At the beginning of the pandemic, the Treasury Board Secretariat tracked the operation status of the federal institutions' ATIP offices and found that 46 out of the 265 offices can operate at full capacity, and that all but one were operating at partial capacity. To what extent has the federal government kept you informed of the status of ATIP offices within federal institutions?
I have been receiving the updates, and they do a survey with all the institutions every couple months, I think, or maybe monthly. The only problem with those updates is they don't say to what capacity. When they say partial capacity, we've noticed that with respect to our complaints, we've been dealing with analysts at the beginning who only had cell phones. They didn't have access to their server. They didn't have access to their files. So now most of them do have access through a laptop from home, but they don't maybe have access to top secret files. They don't have access to paper files. So those partially accessible files or ATIP units, It can go from 10% to 90%. You know, it's a very it's hard to know exactly what it means. So, but the Treasury Board is sending us the results every month or every couple months.
And so you're unclear about why some offices are able to operate at full capacity or partial capacity while others not at all? Like what is the reason and the rationale they're providing you for these inadequacies?
Every one of them have different challenges. We talk to somebody like Library and Archives who are dealing with a more enormous amount of paper files because they're historical files. So these people, when they were told they cannot access the office, had a huge challenge in front of them to respond to access requests. You have other group who are dealing with very secret documents or classified documents. And that, again, nobody can work from home, or very limited people can work from home on secret documents. And then there's also those department who the like I said earlier, the OPI, the people who have access to the document that you're asking as a Canadian, they don't see ATIP as their primary activity. It's not part of their work. So that's where I talk about culture change. We need our public servants to see this as their responsibility. It's not just the analyst at the ATIP office that needs to work on ATIP files. It's all of our job. We are all responsible. So when I create a document, I need to know that that document could be accessible, and that if somebody asks for it, I have to know where it is, and I have to be able to provide it to my ATIP analyst in a very timely manner, because they have 30 days to respond to that request. So if you and I spend 10 days finding it, that takes 10 days out of 30 days. You know? So everybody, and that's where I think the leadership directive and the guidance from the top of every institution needs to come down.
I strongly agree and appreciate your candor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Green, and thank you,
together, a process that actually affects all of us. It's not a motion that was meant to be partisan or to seclude or to divide in any way. The motion was that because of the food loss study, to see what would emerge, and just some data that right now that I have in front of me, that we're pretty well wasting 13 million tons of food is wasted every year in Canada. That's 396 kilos per capita, and that this process contributes to almost 56.5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions in Canada. And if you want to compare that, that's roughly equal to the annual emissions of about 12 million cars. The other stuff that's on sort of more of on the more personal side is that the amount of food that we waste could feed almost 24 million Canadians a year. So this was an issue that I felt that would bring us all together in a way, because we all represent diverse parts of the country, but we all have dealing with some of the similar issues. And I thought that this would be a way to sort of talk about things in a more succinct manner, because this has been brought to the media and other things. So I think for our committee, in a way of doing this in a manner which kind of brings all our diverse regions together, but we could do this in a way that would be nonpartisan, but would be really, I think, good for the country, whether we talk about the economy, agriculture, poverty. I think food loss is something that we should really focus on, and I look for the support of this motion.
Mr. Albus?
Yeah, so just on this, look, I'm okay with the Liberal Party deciding that it wants to study this particular subject. The question I just had was, when is it going to happen? And no one's been able to say that. Now, to be fair, Mr. Chair, you've said, well, maybe the steering committee can look at that. That's fine. I just would ask that the Liberals would work with their vice chair and with their chair, and just figure out which direction we're rowing in. Because quite frankly, if they want to say, we're going to do M34 as our study, then we restart the cycle. It's a block study, an NDP study, a conservative study, and then we'll see Mr. Sani's food waste. That's fine with me. I'm completely fine with that. I just really would like to say it'd be really helpful if members would talk to one another and figure these things out.
Mr. Shifke, you're on mute. Mr. Shifke? Mr.